with some of our CMIOs and CNIOs about innovation at the bedside. And I'll introduce each one of them, just their name and where they work. And then we have a couple of questions that we want to make sure that we are able to answer. And then we, again, would love this to be interactive. So we'll go through a couple of the questions. We'll ask you guys to ask some questions. And then we have a little bit of information that we'll wrap up with at the end. So please don't hesitate to raise your hand or let us know if you have any questions. So first off, we have Dr. Jeff Clarke. He is the CMIO at Confluence Health. Dr. Rod Thoreau. He's the CMIO at Seattle Children's, and I may have said your last name incorrectly. Next to him, we have Carol Shade, who is the CNIO at Seattle Children's, and then we have Kelly RESCO-SUMMERS, who's the CNIO at the University of Washington Medicine. So one of the things that I think is really important is when we think about innovation, it should positively influence quality, safety, and patient outcomes. Nurses and providers are ideally positioned to identify, create, and sustain innovative improvements in patient care. So I want each of the panelists to start off by telling you a little bit about what innovations they've deployed at their current organization or an organization they've worked at in the past, and what successes and failures they experienced during that process. So go ahead and start with you.
Okay, I guess sometimes sitting next to you, and I'll be the first one to lead off, and then Rob can do it after that. So, Confluence is in eastern Washington. We have a very large geographic spread from Wenatchee to Leavenworth, up to the Canadian border, over Moses Lake. And we have 13 satellites, so we're spread over a large area. We have about 150 bed hospital, and then we have a smaller hospital, it's about 40 beds. And one of our exciting, I guess we call it innovation related to direct patient care, is our dive into cognitive computing, or into artificial intelligence. And we have deployed several different algorithms and models, including sepsis, a deterioration index, a readmission algorithm. And it's interesting to watch the deployment of this over the past year. The expectation, of course, is that if we're really savvy on detecting sepsis early and making sure that all the elements of the evaluation of the patient and the treatment of the patient are performed in a very timely setting, that we would see a reduction in deaths from sepsis. Not only is the putting in the algorithm an interesting tool, but it's how do you present the information to the end users, which I think is actually probably the more difficult or more interesting piece, and that's where really informatics spends a lot of time. What information do we present to the end user that is actionable, that actually makes a difference in a timely fashion? So over the past year, we spent a lot of time talking with the nursing staff and with the providers as to where do they want to see information, how do they want to see it pop up at them, what's the timing, trying to figure out what time zero is. It's actually one of the more difficult pieces of that. We have a sepsis algorithm. Sorry to say, at the end of a year of this, we actually did not see a drop in our sepsis mortality rates. So sometimes you can deploy and it looks really great, it's a nice shiny object, but it doesn't always happen. However, we do have a nice correlator to that, and that's the deterioration index. So that actually did show over this time period a almost 30% reduction in rapid response teams calls. So that means that presumably by presenting the data, the deterioration of the patient to the nursing staff, that they were able to contact the providers, make interventions in advance that actually prevented that RRT. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Are we finished on the sepsis piece? No. But that's part of the ITER process or the PDSA, coming back and looking at those systems. How do we present the data, and do we have systems in place to actually be actionable to have an impact? So that's an inpatient example. I have another interesting ambulatory example, but I'm going to pass the baton.
So let's hear from Rob. What have you guys done here?
I'm going to talk a little bit about a concept rather than a specific technology. Up until a little bit over a year ago, we took care of some of our sickest patients using technologies created in the 19th century. We were still using carbon copy paper and faxing to do certain things. And we had tried multiple times over the previous 5 to 10 years to convert to an electronic process. And every time we went through the standard project-based, ticket-based request processing prioritization process, it failed for one reason or another. Either it was taking too long, we couldn't get the resources, we couldn't get everybody to agree, and it was frustrating. And whenever we would bring it up, our analysts would roll their eyes and say, oh, it's that time of year again, it's time to talk about TPM again. Our innovation was actually an internally disruptive innovation, which was the concept of a hackathon. We partnered with a couple of local companies, and it was sponsored by our enterprise analytics team, and they got multiple teams from around the organization, anywhere from 3 to our team's about 8 people, to propose ideas that they said could potentially improve our patients' care. And because we were able to fully concentrate our people, our resources, our effort over the span of 2 days on this problem, we were able to solve a problem that had failed in multiple times over the previous 10 years in the span of 2 days. Over those 2 days, we put together a proposal, we put together a proof of concept, and showed it to our organizational leaders, who were impressed enough to say, we realize this isn't the typical way we do things, but go do this. And a project that likely, via the standard methods, would have taken about 9 to 12 months, we were able to do in just over 2 months. And since then, we have, I think we estimated that over about a year, we saved about 50,000 pieces of paper. We have reduced dramatically the number of errors that reach our patients. And I think the most important thing is we've introduced a little bit of doubt in terms of how do we always do things? Does it always have to go via the same route of project management? Versus can you encourage all of the people out there who are seeing the patients at the front line to think about, I can do this better? And how do you enable your organization to facilitate that and encourage that and allow patient care to improve without going through the typical governance processes? I think that was the coolest thing to do.
Hi, I'm Carol Shade. I'm Seattle Children's as well. I have the pleasure, I actually report up through nursing, which keeps me very closely aligned, I think, with a lot of the strategic goals and visions of what nursing wants with quality and safety. I'll just add to the hackathon. The great thing about that is our organization put it on, and really everyone was able to submit an idea. There were ideas around classy predictive analytics, all kinds of things to reduce central line infections and everything. It was very collaborative with pharmacists and physicians and nursing. What I wanted to share a little bit about was some other creative innovation things that we've done at Seattle Children's, where we've actually created custom dashboards. We did a 75-inch monitors that we put up in all the patient units. We did it in what we would say a pretty fast pace also for our hospital, because as we know, change in hospitals oftentimes go at a snail's pace, very slow. So we set up strategically to define the process where we would have 3 design sessions. We would identify champions from each of the units. We had IT completely on board with the resources with this tight timeline to be able to deliver. And then we set guidelines around it to have like 4 main areas. Patient flow, because patient flow to look at whether the units are red, green, or yellow as far as how well they're flowing. Quality, safety, communication, I think was one. So we have things on this board. The big takeaway I would say was that it was of value to everyone. So for the nurses and the leaders on the units, it was something of value. In a minute, I'll share an example of one which we maybe missed a little bit by not really understanding the value to the customer again. So for this one though, we had things like if the nurse collected documentation on the patient spoke a different language, was there an order in the system for an interpreter? If there wasn't, it appeared on this board. So it's very visual for everyone to be able to see, either when walking by the board or when they're at their desktop computer, they can see it. At their desktop computer, they can actually hover in and see more details around what the need was. The patient had, like on our oncology unit, it was really important for those high-risk medications to help resource any of the patients that had 2 RN checks, because that helps be able to identify where to deploy a resource nurse to help another nurse who perhaps might have a physio assignment or more medications that require that. But other things like nephrotoxic drugs and everything on that. So again, the benefit of that was we had people from the front line, charge nurses, night shift nurses, day shift nurses, providers, to help identify what is it you need to see, what's the visibility that you need to create safety, quality, and good patient flow for your units. Another example of another project that we did, which was a great project. The difficult thing was there was complexity in the project, and that we were introducing a technology solution for barcode scanning of breast milk and formula. Definitely something that's needed. I don't think anyone would argue that that's not a safe feature to be able to add that. We've had formula errors, we've had some breast milk errors or near misses, and we wanted to add that solution to it. At the same time, there was interest and benefit in other things around safety, such as the current time what we did was nutrition. The dietitian would calculate the additives that would be added to the formula or the breast milk to give it more calories for the babies if possible. And so they would send it up to the unit, and the nurse would have to mix it in the kitchen. This kitchen that has very small, a lot of other things going on, not your ideal space. And so we wanted to open a milk lab where people that were hired solely for the purpose of looking up on a computer, getting the formula mixture and calculating it, and then having it delivered just in time when you need it. The miss we had was, I think, 2 things. One, the impact of opening a large operational milk lab and the ability to get it out there to the unit. And the second thing was, for those nurses on the unit and also for the patients and families, when you take all the breast milk and move it down to a central location, which again is the right thing to do, what loss is there for those patients and families? What is it that they no longer have that control over? And so we had some hiccups with that go live. We've learned from that though, in the value of really talking with the customers, both the nurses, the clinicians, and also the patients and families. And we can have a lot more patient engagement, I think, whenever we go live with a technology innovation or an innovation that's really centered around workflow.
Hi, I'm relatively new to the University of Washington, so there's lots of innovations there. I've only been there 4 months. But spent the last 3 years at a large healthcare organization in the digital space, and kind of taking a bit off of the earlier speakers, and much like you, wanted to speak more conceptually than an individual deliverable, because I could name products and tools and apps and things that have been implemented with various degrees of success. My primary role was around digital care transformation. You can have the best possible tool, the greatest app, the greatest vendor relationship. If you don't have a care model or a business system to support it, it will not be adopted. We had some great partnerships where we worked collaboratively with vendors. Just like the earlier speaker said, we were a hybrid shop. We built some of our own. We collaborated with others. And in those cases where we had organizational buy-in and we tied to a very specific problem or mission-driven goal of the organization, we had great success. I wouldn't say it was easy every time, but we had staying power and success. When we brought in the great shiny tool that was a great idea but didn't have something very meaningful to hang it on to, was when we really struggled to get adoption. And I would say for most of us in healthcare, those of us who have been in it for a while, our biggest challenge is going to be to change the patient-provider relationship and fundamentally change our care models to support these tools that are coming in. And when I look at organizations like Apple and Amazon and others, the reason why they're disruptive is they're not being held back by our own constructs. We have such hierarchy and structure that we put into place over the years that we're unwilling to let go of. And if we're not willing to let go of that and look at things differently, change our relationship with our consumers and our patients, they will do it for us.
So Kelly and Carol
Carol both touched on this a little bit while they were talking, but one thing that people often struggle with is how do you define that why? How do you implement change management? So who wants to take this question, but can you talk about managing the change management within your organization and how you get them past those organizational constructs and that just pushing that to move forward?
I'll give a shot at it. Yeah, I think that this is the most difficult piece that I think we face in leadership. Certainly, starting out with what problem are you trying to solve is a big step in that direction. So many times, people are attracted to those shiny new objects or the technology. And at Confluence, we have a boatload of tools. We've purchased all sorts of different things that are great tools, but our adoption is variable. You certainly have the people that are the innovators, the early adopters, they're all jazzed about it, and we have a number of laggards. So I think following the classic steps that Connor's outlined are really important in terms of change management. Certainly defining what the problem is, what problem are we trying to solve, the why, communicating that why, and then developing those liaisons or those stakeholders, or and that's really something I spend a lot of time with, is identifying those people who are impacted, number one, this is very important, and the people that are going to help me advance that change, and assembling that team. It often requires multiple attempts. I can think of several examples where we've started off on different forays into population health, and we have some very nice tools to that with registries, development of dashboards, etc. But then halfway in the process, leadership, I would have to say, saw a shiny new tool and decided that going outside of our EHR program was something that they would like to do. Fortunately, we were able to steer that ship back into our common platform. But it is that process of those relationships. I think the communication forms are difficult. It doesn't seem to matter whether it's the email, whether it's the attending meetings, going to committees, presentations. You can't do it enough. So communication strategy is really important. And then when you finish with all that, you go through the implementation piece and get out on the other end of it, you still have left a lot of people behind. And then it's coming back and figuring out what is the recommunication strategy. Again, coming back to the why, making sure that the why, or what problem we're trying to solve, is aligned with the organizational goals. And then you end up doing, I think, a lot of cleanup work at the end, which is that sometimes becomes elbow-to-elbow relationships, where we actually spend time going to the providers and saying, okay, have you considered this? One of the difficulties that we face, I'm a general internist, and I spend so much time during the day just trying to get through my day. There's something that's called cognitive overload. And there are so many pieces of information that hit me during the day that I have to figure out something to do with that information. That as somebody who actually loves interesting new things, the hurdle for me to actually come and use a new technology is relatively low, but that's not shared with all the rest of my partners and the other providers in the system. They figure out a way to do something. They get through their day, they process the information, and the most important thing, of course, is taking care of the patient and moving them along. It's that piece of moving beyond where it's safe, and that's where the elbow-to-elbow
Rob, do you want to add something, and then we'll go ahead and take some questions?
We're in the middle of a big change right now as we're implementing a new EHR. One of the things that I've found has been helpful is a combination of storytelling and humility. Storytelling because our brains crave context. And so you can tell somebody statistics until you're blue in the face, but if you can connect it to a specific story, it has really helped. Humility is important on both sides. One is, like Jeff said, acknowledging that I, as a CMIO, may know the technology, but I don't know how it's affecting you in your area. So going to the people's areas and really figuring out how they're struggling. Yet at the same time, one of the things we don't often do is demand humility. We, in medicine, in some cases, are so stuck in our ways that we forget why we're actually doing something. And in a lot of cases, we think what we're doing is the best way, whether it be locally or even regionally, that we're married to that. And trying to expand our vision to say, there may be somebody else in my organization, there may be somebody else outside of my organization or outside of my state who actually does it better than I do. I'm not the best at everything that I do. And collaborating and asking other people how they're doing it is such a big help.
I was just going to add, as Rob mentioned, we are going through a large EHR change right now, and as an organization, it may seem sometimes like we're not really changing our culture, but I do see little bits and pieces of it. We've tried to adopt a model of really, change. I think ADPAR is what they're using. Acknowledgement, desire. Acknowledgement, desire, knowledge. Well, I will come back to that because I totally forgot it. Anyway, the thing to keep in mind, I think, is that change is a process, but it's also very personal. And I think a lot of times it's comfortable to stay, even if we might like it to be different, we feel like it's tedious, the work that we do every day, it's still comfortable because we know it. And as you go through that change, you go through that transition, it becomes, you get anxious and stressful because you don't know it, and then you get into the future, which is still unknown. And so I think that's important as an organization to recognize that as you go through the change, because change is inevitable. We have to, or we'll be like, the example of the blockbuster in one level.
All right, is there anyone out there that has some questions for the group?
I was wondering if you could maybe speak to, and maybe this is, I don't know if it fits your organization or not, but there's kind of a, you might call it an innovation selection process. And what are the one or two really important things that you think about when you're trying to decide, is this an innovation that we're going to expend our limited energy on?
Kelly, do you want to comment on that?
Sure, I can start with that. At least for our organizations, first and foremost, does it align with a major initiative that we have in place, be that a particular demographic that we wish to serve or grow, or a specific mission focus. Both of the organizations that I've worked for the last 15 years have been mission-focused organizations. So that's the first thing. Reality is cost is another key factor. Will this have some sort of return on investment? That's not always hard dollars. That may be soft dollars, but if we can tie it to a business strategic initiative that will move our organization forward and stay aligned with our mission, then it's a high probability of success.
Dr. Clark, I believe one of the examples you talked about with your applications of AI was randoms. Can you expand upon that a little bit and what the results of that use case were?
Yeah, it's a little bit early on to me, I guess, to see if we've actually made a difference on that. We're currently deploying a case management dashboard that actually looks at some of those risk for readmission scores. And then that helps to then triage for case management those patients that they need to touch and then see if we can actually make an impact on that. Now that has to be tied in with the appropriate resources to make an intervention. For example, for several years we had just heart failure clinic, and then we don't have just heart failure clinic right now. So if we are identifying that population and we have access issues, or we don't have the resources necessary to make the evaluation. You could have case management and all sorts of dashboards, but you don't get anybody. So of those several, there are at least 5 that we have in motion now for our cognitive computing AI platforms. Only 2 are actually up, live, and running. So that was the one I mentioned was the sepsis, and the second one was the deterioration index. So I can't give you any info yet just on what we're going to do with the evidence, but it's active. And back to the earlier question about how do we make a selection, this fits into Confluence Health's quadrant of does it have first and foremost benefit for patient care. Secondly, does it improve our financial stability? Is there an ROI associated with it? So that all of these, whether it's a risk for readmission or whether it's a deterioration index, those have to fly by those pillars that we select projects for.
Hi. I'd like to find out what is your definition of innovation? I think that nowadays we're using the word innovation pretty largely, or we're kind of dedicating innovation to an innovation centers. So I'd like to find out from you what makes innovation versus regular business requirement, 1, and 2, who drives really innovation from a business strategic standpoint or from the creativity of the people inside of the business?
Carol, would you like to start with that one?
Sure. I know innovation seems to be one of the big buzzwords for a while now. I think it's one of our top 6 values. We've renamed the nursing department to be nursing practice, professional development, and innovation. So you see it everywhere, right? I do feel like we also have a system in our organization where you can submit ideas all the time. It's called e-feedback. So if there's any kind of situation, near miss, anything you find, you put it in the system, and then you also say a suggestion for improvement. And oftentimes, as Rod and I know, the innovative improvement is often something in the system to solve it, which isn't always the answer. And I know there are departments that do have innovation centers. The hackathon to me was one of our greatest things because it was the ability to have people submit an idea and then have kind of a board of people to listen to it and tie it to organizational significance. Like I mentioned, the CLARKE and predictive analytics. We've been working on CLARKE for a while, and how can we just lower it even more than what it is? And so that's one that obviously ties to one of our strategic goals, and it has value. And then being able to be innovative, the way they did the hackathon, they were able to pull the people together and literally lock them in a room for a while, so to say, and say, now work on it. We'll help clear your calendars, and what resources do you need? And bring in outside companies, Microsoft, other people to help with that. And so to me, that was a real innovative ways, but you see innovation in a variety of different settings. And it's also innovative from a nursing perspective, just from the workflow process perspective, not always technology, but technology does help with that disruption and moving us along to something different.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question. I really look at innovation as creative problem solving. It is nothing more than that, and it can be something as simple as a very small tweak and change to a workflow that has a fundamental impact to a patentable idea. And it's everything in between. And I think right now we get really excited about the technology, and especially in the mobile space and the apps and the this and the that, when in fact some of our greatest innovations have been human-to-human interaction changes.
Yeah, a lot of times it comes down to, is it technology that's pulling the organization, or is the organization asking for technology to solve a problem? So both happen. And one example of technology that we're maybe pulling the organization with is something called Cardigram, which is a wayfinding app for patients inside buildings to help them find and navigate through the building. Very cool. But yes, we're leading the organization, I think, in that regard. The other example would be using our existing external facing portal called Epicare Link, where our assisted living facilities are now able to see the entire chart. And over the past year, we did a MAR discrepancy, medication administration record discrepancy between the ALFs and what we had in Epic, and it was almost 30%. And then, but by workflow, by engaging the ALFs and putting them onto this platform where they now have a messaging process, and if they identify a discrepancy in the MAR, then they message the providing team to fix it. So now we have the same MAR in both, because it's just way too often that I, as a physician, think my patient is taking something and they're not. And their med errors occur. People wind up in the hospital because of those med errors. And then we were able to, in our 1-year trial so far, of 4 facilities with 50 chart abstractions compared to when we started out, we had over 30% MAR error rate or defect rate. We were able to reduce that in 4 facilities from 1 to 8%. So it's a workflow issue using the tool. And some of those innovations that we have are not just, again, the shiny new object. These are ways of systems that we evaluate that actually improve care. That's the innovation.
So I want to thank you guys for coming up here and speaking to the group. I do believe we have a break after this, so I'm sure if you have additional questions, they'd be more than willing to answer them. So thank you.